Once a man was walking down the road toward his village. He was not paying attention to anything around him. This man believed himself an educated person of life. He was always deep in thought. He liked to think about important things. He did not put his mind to ordinary problems. If it wasn't possible, or at least very complicated, he didn't care about it at all. This man spent all day looking out over the ocean, and he only paid attention to things that he thought were useful. He didn't see the beauty of the ocean. The only things he thought about were sharks and shipwrecks. He didn't see the clear blue sky. He was thinking about all the storms that must have been shaking and rolling around far away. He did not hear the wonderful songs of the birds. He only thought about how many of their nests had been robbed. He didn't see the playful animals swinging through branches or rustling in the grass. He only wondered whether or not the great cats were on the prowl. That was the kind of man he was. As he walked back toward the village that day, he happened to pass a pile of bones. They were white and they shined in the bright sun. He stopped and stared down at them. He was the sort of man who would stop to stare down at a pile of bones. The skull on the pile was resting above all the other bones, and it seemed to be watching him, watching the man, just as intently as he was watching it. The man reached out and picked up the skull. He held it one way and then the other. He looked very seriously into the empty eye sockets and said, "What has brought you here, brother?" "Talking," the skull replied without much interest. The man was so shocked, he dropped the skull and jumped back. He watched the skull for a few minutes before he managed to say, "You can talk?" "Yes," said the skull. "Talking is very easy. All you have to do is open your mouth and out it comes. Talking is easy. Finding something worthwhile to say is not." The man was amazed. He had never seen a talking skull before, let alone one that could spout such wisdom. "I must take you to the village," the man yelled. He scooped up the skull and ran as fast as he could. The villagers saw him coming, and a great many of them ran for their homes. You see, he was the kind of man who was always getting busy people into useless conversations when there was work to be done. He never seemed to be quiet, and he never spoke about anything anyone wanted to hear. As he entered the village, he called out to his neighbors, "Come quickly, I have something wonderful to show you." No one came. The man was so excited that he did not even understand that the few people in sight were moving away from him. "Put down whatever you are doing, everyone. I have a marvelous mystery to show all of you, the likes of which you have never before seen." When the man said the word mystery, you could be sure he got the attention of some of the villagers. They started poking their heads out of their houses. Women left their yams cooking, men put down their digging sticks, and children stopped their playing. They all began to gather around the man. When he saw that he had everyone's attention, he drew out the skull. He could not have prepared himself for what happened next. Everyone stared at the skull for a moment, then they all started yelling. "Mamma, what is he doing?" cried the little boy. "How dare you bring that thing here?" his mother howled, waving a spoon. "Somebody do something," said another, holding her child. "Send him away," demanded a third mother. The men, who still had gardening tools in their hands, started waving them. "Move out of the way!" yelled a man with a digging stick. "Somebody get the chief!" said an old man, holding his grandson's hand. There was so much noise and craziness, the chief came to see what was happening. "What's going on?" the chief roared. He was a very well-behaved chief, and he did not like all this yelling and holding and showing off of gardening tools in the middle of the village. All the people were silent except for one villager. He stood up and pointed to the man with the skull. "This man told us he had something to show us. Then he pulled out that awful skull. We thought he was trying to call the dark spirits to the village, and we were trying to stop him." "Oh," said the chief, eyeing the man with the skull. "And were you going to call the dark spirits to my village?" "Certainly not," the educated person declared, glad that the chief was there. He was sure the chief would understand this thinking-related matter. "Then what were you doing?" the chief asked with curiosity. "Well," the man said in a snobby voice, "I was on my way home from the ocean when I came across a pile of bones. On top of the heap was this skull. It spoke to me. I brought it here to share this wonder with the village." The chief did not look convinced. "I'll show you," the man said, raising the skull so it looked at the chief. "Say something to the chief," he commanded. The skull said nothing. The chief frowned. "Speak," the man said. "I command you." The skull remained silent. One of the children laughed. "Speak," he said. "You must speak." The man started getting nervous. The skull said nothing. The man begged and pleaded with the skull. The skull remained silent. The people began to get angry again, and the chief got angry right along with them. "You are always a troublemaker in my village, and now you come here with this nonsense." The chief and the people had had enough. They took the skull from the man, found the mound of bones he had taken it from, and put it back there. That very day the villagers held a meeting with the chief and decided to throw the man out of their village. They watched him collect his few belongings and said to him, "Since you found that skull so much company, why don't you go live with it?" The man stormed out of the village and down the road to the pile of bones. He picked up the skull. Before he could get one word out of his mouth, the skull said, "Sorry about that." "What? Now you talk. That's not going to do me much good. Why didn't you say something back in the village?" "I told you," the skull replied. "It's easy to talk. It's not always easy to find something worthwhile to say." "You are completely and totally unpleasant," the man screamed. "I don't know what trouble you caused that brought you to this sorry state, but you deserve everything you got." "I already told you what got me into trouble."